Trident Marketing Communications Manager Daniel Sloan, and we're excited to be bringing you today's Culture of Research and Education webinar called Demystifying the Dissertation Process. This core webinar series is designed to provide faculty, students, and alumni an opportunity to share their research and scholarship with the Trident community. By fostering a culture of professional development and idea exchange, participants will have access to a valuable forum for lifelong learning. This university-wide effort is coordinated by Trident Doctoral Studies directors, including Dr. Wenling Li. A few notes before we begin today's session. Please ask questions at any time. A few of you have already reached out with questions, so appreciate the proactive effort on your part. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, but if you have any questions, get them in early and we'll make sure that we get to them. Everyone's muted, so the questions that you have to ask, just send them in the question box. Right-hand side of your screen, about halfway down. Do not use the raise hand function because it's hard for us to communicate with you that way, and your question will not be addressed. It's just too difficult for us. So use that question box. And also, this webinar will be recorded. We'll have a link to the presentation and the slides ready for you by early next week. Today's session is hosted by Dr. Wenling Li, Doctoral Director of our College of Education. A little bit about her: she holds a Ph.D. in cognitive psychology from Beijing Normal University and has postdoctoral experience at the Department of Psychology at University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. She was a senior research scientist at the Center for the Study of Reading at UIUC prior to Trident. Her primary research interests are reading, writing, and instructional approaching K through 12. And school leadership and administration. She has authored 7 books and numerous articles on dynamic issues in children's learning and language mastery. Welcome, Dr. Li. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Daniel, for your great introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so pleased to have such an opportunity to meet you all here. I'm very glad to introduce today's presenter, Dr. Michael Wesolek. Dr. Wesolek has been teaching and developing graduate courses at Trident University since 2006 and also serves as a doctoral mentor. Dr. Wesolek has served as a military instructor pilot and a maintenance test pilot, and as a research psychologist in the U.S. Armed Forces. In addition to his duties at Trident, he has published peer-reviewed articles and serves as an OSHA outreach instructor for the University of Alabama. Welcome to Dr. Wesolek. Now the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Dr. Lee. I'm very excited to do this tonight, and hopefully my excitement won't get ahead of me. I love talking about this, and we have so much information to cover. I'm going to try to hit the high points and answer as many questions as I can. There is 3 hours worth of webinar information that we could cover and still probably not cover everything. I know that when I was working on my dissertation, I was longing for as much information as I could get. So hopefully, because this is specific to Trident University, it will be very helpful. And once again, I'm available for questions during, after, anytime. So let's jump into this because we have a lot of ground to cover, and we need to move on. So the agenda for today is, first of all, we're going to talk a little bit about timelines and requirements. We'll talk about the actual dissertation progress, the requirements to progress through the dissertation, the purpose of the dissertation, a quick overview on why do we even do this thing? You know, is it a rite of passage? What's the purpose of it? We'll talk briefly about research methodologies, the 3 types that we use here at Trident, Then we'll talk about the dissertation proposal and dissertation chapters, and we'll kind of go through those one by one. And then we'll talk about the 20 dissertation tasks that are required to complete the process. After that, we will have questions and discussions, and I'll end with a few tips that through my 10+ years of doing this, I've gained a little knowledge, mainly from mistakes. So hopefully I can impart some of that knowledge to you guys so that you don't make the same mistakes I did. So the first question is, how long do I have to complete the dissertation or the PhD dissertation? So basically, once you start the dissertation process, which is the 700 level courses, you have 3 years to complete the dissertation. If you go beyond that, if you have extenuating circumstances, you can get permission from the dean or the PhD director to continue beyond that. The general program requirements for the PhD are 56 credit hours or semester hours of coursework at the 600 level. Those are your coursework, your core courses that you have to take. Once you complete that, you'll be required to take an oral and written comprehensive exam. And basically, you'll have it's similar to a dissertation proposal or dissertation defense, where you will have written questions that you have to answer, and then you will kind of present your prospectus to a panel, usually 2 or 3 professors from the university, and so that we can gauge whether or not you're ready to move on to the dissertation process, because it's very rigorous. Once you've successfully completed the written and oral exam, you move on to the dissertation proposal, and that's where you work very closely with your dissertation chair to complete a good draft of your proposal. Once your chair thinks it's ready for committee review, he or she will forward it to the committee, and then once we get feedback from the committee, we'll forward that, consolidate all that, forward it to the student to make corrections, and then we'll schedule a defense. So it's important, and we'll talk more about this later, but it's important that you restrict your communication to your chair, because that person is your advocate in this process. And not that you have any adversaries, but that person is the one that is there to make sure you successfully navigate through this process. And at times, you know, because of different opinions on things, you might get conflicting feedback from the committee. And if you're communicating directly with the committee members, it makes it a little bit more difficult, and the chair can deconflict those and explain to the committee members why they're going to have you go in a certain direction. So it's better just to stay communicating with your chair. It makes things a whole lot easier. Once you've successfully defended your dissertation proposal, and there'll be several iterations, so you go through the proposal, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later on, but once you've successfully defended that, you'll go to the Institutional Review Board, or you'll submit an application to the Institutional Review Board. The Institutional Review Board is there solely for the purpose of the protection of human subjects in research. So they will review it, make sure that everything you're doing maintains confidentiality and will not cause any harm, physical or emotional or anything else, to your research subjects. Once that is approved, then you can move on to the dissertation process, where you collect your data, conduct your analyses, and write the last 2 chapters of your dissertation. And it's very important to note that you cannot collect any data for your dissertation until you have IRB approval. So anything you collect before IRB approval cannot be used in the dissertation. So just don't do it. That's the best way. So what are my dissertation progress requirements? You must defend your proposal by 702. If you don't defend your proposal by DEL 702, you will get a no progress grade for that course, and you can repeat 702 up to 2 additional times. So 3 times total you can take DEL 702. After that, you won't be allowed to continue in the program unless you have extenuating circumstances and the dean or the doctoral program director allows you to continue. 703 to 711. 711 are your dissertation continuation, and that's where you're working on your IRB approval, and then you move on to your data collection or analysis and writing the last 2 chapters of the dissertation. So your 700 level courses, those are the ones after you complete your 600 level, which are your core courses. They are considered full-time courses, so you're considered a full-time student. However, they're not eligible, and this is very important, they're not eligible for VA or federal financial aid. So keep that in mind. So once again, if you're receiving federal aid, it's to your advantage to get through the process as quickly as possible. If you get 2 no progresses, so during each of the DEL 700 courses, you'll be required to provide updates to your committee chair and upload those, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit when we talk about the task. But if your chair feels as though you haven't made progress or enough progress during that term, then you'll receive a grade of NP, which means no progress. And if you get 2 NPs, then you'll be put on academic probation. If you get 3, then you'll be academically disqualified from the program. You'll also be doing your 800 level courses simultaneously, and these are 0 credits, but basically this is an area where you can upload. So basically it's a repository or your e-portfolio where you will upload your progress as you go through the program. Now, all of this that I've just talked about is down in the PhD handbook. That is your best friend. I highly recommend that you download that. I would even print it out, put it in a binder, and reference it all the time. Sleep with it under your pillow even, because that has every detail of the process in there, and it is wonderful. So now we'll talk about what is the purpose of the dissertation. You know, sometimes it maybe seems like it's really a rite of passage, right? Excuse me. But it's really not. It's through your core courses that you take during your 600 level classes. You're learning your research methods, your statistics, and all of that stuff. So basically, the dissertation allows you to have a culminating project where you apply what you've learned in the core courses. So really, there is a purpose to it, because the goal of a PhD is to make you an independent researcher. So this is your way of demonstrating your ability to conduct research independently, and it allows you to publish original research and to contribute to the body of knowledge. So this is why also when you get to your committee, they're going to guide you, but don't expect them to write your dissertation for you. They're going to give you the guidance, and it's going to be a little bit more vague because we're trying to mentor you through the process rather than doing it for you. So don't get too frustrated with your committee members. It's a learning experience, so it's expected that you'll do a lot of research and learning on your own. So the research methodologies that we use at Trident are quantitative, which is the numeric data, and those are where you're just collecting GPAs or anything numerical, and you do a statistical analysis on the data. Qualitative research is the data that really can't be quantified. So obviously quantitative can be quantified. Qualitative data is the data that is gained through observations or interviews or things like that. And it can't really be quantified, but if you collect it, you can look for themes in the data or things like that will add to the research. Quantitative research typically has research questions and hypotheses, and you use statistics to test those hypotheses. Qualitative research usually just has research questions and no hypotheses, because you're not doing the statistics to test your hypotheses. You're just looking at the data to determine if any themes are developing that would either support or refute your research questions or answer your research questions. So what most, and I'll go out on a limb here, but what most dissertations end up using is a mixed methods. And this allows you to collect the quantitative data as well as conduct surveys or interviews or observations to supplement that quantitative data. And it really is a more comprehensive way to conduct your research. But like I say, and also let me back up a little bit. The qualitative research right now is only approved for students in the College of Education. So the other colleges must do either quantitative, pure quantitative, or a mixed methods dissertation. So now let's move on to the 5 chapters of the dissertation. So each of these, really, I highly recommend that you complete each of these in sequence because they build on one another. For example, chapter 1 is the introduction. And this is where you will introduce your topic, give the background on your topic. You'll discuss any problems associated with the topic. And Daniel, if you could move. You'll introduce the topic and you'll develop your research questions. This is where you're basically telling the reader what your topic is and why research needs to be conducted in this area. You're kind of outlining the need for the research, and you're pleading your case or making your case for conducting the research. You'll develop your research questions in there, and you'll support your justification using peer-reviewed research. And that's very important in the PhD process at all levels, is to use peer-reviewed research or peer-reviewed journals or trusted websites, for example, universities or government websites, and not Wikipedia. Everything you do at the doctoral level needs to be justified or supported through the literature, and it needs to be reputable or peer-reviewed literature. So chapter 2 is the literature review. So in chapter 2, this is where you'll do a comprehensive review of all the related literature. So you're going to start with a very broad view of everything that's out there that's even remotely related to your topic. And then you'll slowly, like a funnel, narrow it down to the topic that you're conducting the research in. But it's very important that you do a very comprehensive review, and through that, you'll establish your theoretical foundation and your conceptual framework for your study, and you'll also start seeing where the gaps in the research are, and that will help support your need for the research as well. And this is also chapter 2, or the literature review, is where you basically conduct the research to come up with your hypothesis. So you have a research question, and then based on that research question, you'll develop your hypotheses. And your hypotheses are an educated guess, basically. And through chapter 2, your literature review, that's where you, if you will, get the education to come up with your hypotheses. So hopefully you didn't come into it with a bias. You should try to remain as unbiased as possible, but you let the literature guide you into determining what you think the outcome of your research is going to be based on the literature. Okay, then you get to chapter 3, and that's where you develop the methodology. And this is arguably the most important chapter of your entire dissertation or dissertation proposal, because this is really where you make the outline for your plan to conduct the research. So you will describe in excruciating detail the methodology that you'll use, so quantitative, qualitative, if you're in the College of Education, or mixed methods, and justify why you're using that. Then you'll go into very, very detailed description of each of your variables, how you're going to conduct sampling, what your sample is going to be, where you're going to collect the data from, the procedures that you're going to use to collect the data. If you're using any type of survey or anything like that, you have to discuss the survey and each of the questions that relate, or that each of the variables will be collecting data from. You will have to also, if it's a previously used survey, you'll have to show the reliability and validity data, which is a preferred method. However, if you do decide to develop your own survey to conduct the research, or your own interview questions, then you will have to do the reliability and validity testing on your own. So that just adds a little bit more complexity, but it is still doable, obviously. This is also where you'll do your power analysis to determine your estimated sample size for your research. And you'll talk in very, very detailed ways of how you're going to analyze the data. So what statistical analyses you'll use, both all descriptive, bivariate, and multivariate analyses. And for the PhD, you have to, if you're doing any type of quantitative research or mixed methods, you have to use multivariate analysis as well as bivariate, and obviously you'll want to show your descriptive statistics as well. But it's a requirement that you do multivariate analysis to increase the rigor and to be able to make inferences from the data. So once again, this is the most important part, and I will tell you that my students have probably heard this before many times, is that in my opinion, the proposal is the most difficult thing in the whole process, because that is your plan, that is your contract with your committee on, this is why I need to do the research, and this is how I'm going to do the research. Once you're through that and you have you've defended and you have IRB approval, the dissertation, if you really think about it, is just collecting the data, doing the analysis you said you were going to do in Chapter 3, and reporting on it. There's no real working through anything at that point. It's just doing what you have a contract with your committee to do. So that's the way I look at it. Your proposal is your contract with your committee. Once you're through that, you're over the hump, and it's downhill from there. So remember, Chapter 3 is probably the most important, and it is the most detailed, because you have to cover every aspect of your research, your data collection, your analyses, everything. Then you move to Chapter 4, and that's where you actually conduct the analysis and report the results. This chapter is, I'll just say it, it's bland. It should be very straightforward, no opinions or discussions really. This is just a straight, here are the facts. I conduct, this analysis was done. There was a statistically significant difference between X and Y. However, there was no statistically significant difference between Y and Z. So that's where you just report the facts. You'll display the results of your analyses on tables and figures or with graphs, and you'll come to some conclusions, but the real discussion comes in Chapter 5, when that's where you link everything. So in Chapter 5, you'll link the results of the research to the research questions. You'll talk about the implications and the contributions to the body of knowledge that your research will fill, and how, this is the chapter where you might discuss why you felt like your research did or did not come out the way you expect it to because you may not be able to reject the null hypotheses. So it wasn't what you expected, but that doesn't mean that's still a finding. And that's another thing I'll tell you. Just because you can't reject your null hypothesis, that's still a finding. So I use this as an example with my students. You have a new, whiz math program that you developed or that the school system is buying, and you conduct research to see if it's improving grades, and you think it is, you think it will because they're using these gee whiz. However, after you conduct your research, you find that it didn't make a difference. It wasn't any better. And I have students that are like, oh my goodness, am I going to have to start over because, it didn't make a difference. Well, that's still a finding. You may have saved the school district millions of dollars in buying this program because it didn't make a difference. So this is where you will just discuss those findings and that it, why you think it did not, or any anomalies that you found. So this is where you're able to interject a little bit more rather than just stating the facts of the analysis. And then this is also where you typically end with recommendations for future research. So all researchers do this. When you're conducting research, you're in the middle of it, you're in the mix, and you'll always find, you'll be like, you know what? Now that I'm into this, I wish I would have done X, or I wish I would have looked at Y. So this is the point where you can say, okay, to build on this research, I recommend that someone do this or do that, and to supplement what you've done. All those things you thought about during the research process where you were like, I wish I would have collected data on this. Okay, so those are the chapters of the dissertation. So now let's talk about the 20 dissertation tasks. So the first 6 tasks are accomplished during the 600 level courses, and that's during your core coursework that you're taking. You'll develop your academic plan, identify the areas of research, state research questions. You'll draft your problem statement, literature review, and draft research questions. And this is done through DEL 699, where you come up with your prospectus. Once you've completed DEL 699, well, actually, I take that back. At some point in the process, you can take your qualifying exam. So number 7 on the list is the qualifying exam, and that's where I talked about earlier, where you'll have a panel, and it's basically like a little mini proposal defense where you will defend the research that you want to conduct, your research questions and things like that. And it's also, these defenses aren't really designed to be adversarial. It's a way of kind of having a peer review of what you want to do. So you can have a little bit more experienced researchers, the professors, reviewing what you want to do and making suggestions on maybe a different direction, or maybe something that might be a little bit less difficult or to collect data for, or something that might enhance your research, some addition to it. So the qualifying exam, once you've completed that, you'll upload that to your task, and you'll upload your dissertation prospectus. From there, you will, at some point also, you will need to take your IRB certificate, or your training for your IRB certificate, I should say. And that's just a requirement by law that you as a researcher have to have training in the protection of human subjects. And in the PhD handbook, there is a link to a website that you will pay a small fee to, and you'll go through that, and that will meet the requirements. And once you pass the little exam on their site after you go through the training, you will get a certificate, and you'll be required to upload that to show that you completed the human subjects training. Then you will begin building your committee, and that's typically done through either recommendations from Dr. Li, faculty members that might have an interest in the research area that you're looking at, or from a professor you may have had from your core courses where you really like that person and you decide that you want to ask them to be your chair or other committee members. Once the dissertation committee is approved, Dr. Li will upload that to your portfolio, and then you'll begin working on your draft dissertation proposal. That's when you'll work closely with your chair once again, and I recommend that you really only communicate with your chair to avoid any confusion. And then once that's complete and you've defended it, you'll upload that as a draft proposal, and then you'll go through the process of finalizing the proposal where you get final approval. And once you have a final approved proposal, that will go in as one of the tasks as well. I'll tell you this as well from experience. Every step along the way, the point of this is to make your research better. So I just tell you up front, expect feedback and corrections at every step of the way. I don't want anyone to have this false sense that they're going to write this great proposal and it's going to go through with no changes required at all. Pretty much every step of the way, even after your committee has approved it after the defense, it's going to go to your Ph.D. director, and 9 times out of 10, probably 99 times out of 100, it's going to require additional changes or recommendations before final approval. So expect that and don't be discouraged. It's just part of the process. And then once you get a final approval, it'll be uploaded, and then you'll move to the dissertation. Whoa. Okay, I'm sorry. I got out of sequence here. After your proposal is approved, you will go through the IRB process. You'll upload that, and so your PhD chair will approve the final dissertation or final proposal. Then you can begin your IRB application, and you have to wait until your proposal is approved because that's part of the application packet, is that you have an approved proposal. You will, and they're detailed, and I won't go into detail on this because in the PhD handbook, there's a very good section on IRB application and with screenshots and click here and do this. But before you submit your IRB application, I highly recommend that you have your chair review it as well, because we have been through many IRBs and we can help you get to the specifics that the IRB needs. Because you have to remember, the IRB is not approving your methodology selection or your survey. They are there to protect human subjects. So the data and information you need to put into your IRB application is only pertaining to the human subjects or the protection of the data. So your chair can help you do that and keep it to a minimum so that the IRB doesn't get bogged down in too much information. Once the IRB approves your research, you'll upload that approval, and then you will start working on your dissertation with your chair, and it'll go through the same process the proposal went through. So you'll go through chair reviewing it first, then it'll be sent to the committee for review. And after each of these steps, remember, there's going to be changes and recommendations. Then it will go to a defense. It'll go to the chairperson, and then you will get additional feedback. You will the once it's done. So that's a quick run through of the task. Once again, in the PhD handbook, there's a lot more detail on that. Very important to emphasize it is to use that and keep it handy at all times. So let's get to a few of Dr. Wesolek's tips, because I've been doing it for 10 plus years, and I've learned, like I said earlier, mainly from mistakes on things that would make the process a bit easier. So I'll constantly seek advice from the chair. Ask your chair questions constantly. Don't be shy. Don't worry. That's what we're here for. We're here to guide you through a process. Don't worry about it. Limit your correspondence. Deviate that you have with contradicting feedback like that. Change the world after you get your PhD, and I say this because I have some students every now and then that really their project keeps growing because they came into the program with this mindset that they're going to conduct this research. And I say that make your research rigorous enough for a PhD, but don't make it so big that you'll never finish. So make sure it's scaled to the right level, and your chair can help you with that. So you may have this grand idea of conducting this big research study, and take your chair's advice. You may need to pare it down. And the next topic, really don't want it to be so big or not. Data is so difficult to collect when they get to it. So I highly recommend you keep it very.
Hey, Dr. Wesolek, sorry to cut in, but it sounds like there's some feedback coming from your end. So you might want to try muting your computer's mic. I think there may be a feedback loop going on.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Does that sound okay?
Excellent.
Okay. I didn't do anything, but I did hear that feedback, but I thought it was coming from another computer. I apologize. My microphone should be muted. Okay. So moving along. Let's see. The dissertation has to be detailed, and this is where a lot of students, this is going well beyond a simple research paper. So you want to assume that the reader knows nothing about your topic. So from chapter 1, give very detailed information on the background of the topic, why you need to conduct the research, the literature review, everything. Assume your reader knows nothing about the topic, and it's good sometimes to even have someone that doesn't really know about the topic read it and say, okay, could you proofread this for me, and also tell me if you understand what I'm saying, and have them recite back what they thought it meant. So that can be helpful as well. There's going to be excruciating detail in a dissertation. There's no way around it. Look at recent Trident dissertations. I can't stress that enough. You can go into ProQuest and download recent Trident dissertations and look at those, and look at the formatting, look at the level of detail in each of the chapters. And you know that dissertation made it through the process. So if yours looks like that, with that level of detail, then you know you're on the right track. Use the template on the PhD resource page. And then this leads to my next two topics, which are learn the APA format and learn Microsoft Word. And I can't stress that enough. The earlier you learn the APA format, the better, because if you start using it in your 600 level courses and it becomes second nature, that's one less thing you have to worry about, because your hands are going to be full when you get to the dissertation phase. So if you learn the APA format early, it'll be second nature to you, and it'll make things a lot easier for you. Microsoft Word as well. There are little quirks and little default settings to Microsoft Word, and if you learn those, it makes things a whole lot easier too. How to do, you know, page breaks as opposed to section breaks, and page numbering and things like that. I mean, even little things like Microsoft Word by default is set to make more space between paragraphs than when you just are then double space. So when you hit enter to start a new paragraph, you actually have more space between the paragraphs. But in the APA format, everything is supposed to be double space. So little things like that. And you can learn to also do your page numbering as well as your table of contents. You can set Microsoft Word up so that you can do different levels of headers, and it will automatically populate a table of contents. And if you ask any recent PhD student, they will probably tell you that the table of contents is the most difficult thing, because there's constant changes going on to your dissertation, and the page numbers change all the time. However, if you use the automatic table of contents in Microsoft Word, every time you make changes and that header moves to a different page because you added another paragraph or two, it will automatically be updated in the table of contents. So you won't be chasing that around. Okay, next one. Only make changes that your committee recommends. I've had in the past students, and it's in good faith and they want to do a great job, but the committee has reviewed their dissertation or their dissertation proposal and came back with 7 different recommendations, you know, to make. And I'll get the dissertation proposal back from the student, and they'll say, you know, I fixed the things the committee members said to fix, and then I added this, and I took this out, and I decided to expand on this, and then it has to go to committee review again. So I highly recommend that you do just what the committee tells you to do, nothing more, nothing less, and make it through the process. Another thing, when the committee makes recommendations, is use track changes. And that's another function of Word that you can use. But then it shows, so when a committee member makes a comment in your dissertation using track changes, you can go right behind that committee member and make the changes that they recommended, and it will show those changes, and then it will allow you to make a comment there to say how you address the recommended changes. What does that mean for you? Well, when the committee gets it back and they have to re-review it after you've made the recommendations or recommended changes, they can easily see where you made the changes instead of having to go through the entire document again. They can see, well, the person only made changes here, here, and here, because I can see it with track changes, and they did exactly what I asked them to do. So use track changes. It will speed the turnaround time up significantly. Have someone else proofread your work. And I say this because we tend to read what we think or what we know we meant to say, but not necessarily what's on the paper. So when we're reading through, we miss things because we know what we wanted to say, but we may have made some typos or some grammatical errors. So it's good to have someone else proofread your words or your work. And don't skip steps in the process. It's a deliberate process. It's tried and true over many, many years. And like I went through each of the chapters, it's very important that you build on each chapter. Chapter 1 sets the groundwork. Chapter 2 builds on that. Chapter 3 builds on that, and so on and so forth. So if you jump straight to the methodology section before you conduct your literature review, and after you've done your chapter 1, all out of order, it's gonna make the process, you're gonna be putting the cart before the horse. So each is supposed to build on the next, and it's designed that way. Stay positive. there's going to be many times when you get discouraged because your chair is constantly saying it's not ready, it's not ready, you need to add this, you need to do this, you need to change this. I know it's difficult to get that constructive criticism constantly, but it is in an attempt to make your dissertation as close to perfect as possible, because once it's published, it's out there and there's no changing it. So the committee is going to work hard to try to get it as close to perfect as possible for you. So trust them, know they have your best interest in mind, and they're really not out to get you, I promise. And don't procrastinate. The quicker you turn around your recommendations, the quicker you'll get to proposal defense and then to dissertation defense and getting those letters after your name. So try, as difficult, I understand, because I was working full-time when I did my PhD, and it was difficult, and you make a lot of sacrifices, and we understand that. So do the best you can, but really try to carve out that time you need so that you can get through the process quickly. So the bottom line, to summarize everything, is the dissertation process is long, tedious, but deliberate. There is a method to the madness, and there is a logic behind everything. So just work through it, and it's not designed to be fast. It's designed to be somewhat slow so that there's time for reflection, there's time for thought on changes and revision. So you're not going to do it in one term, defend your dissertation now in 701. It's not going to happen. It's designed that way so that you can really reflect on your learning and make it as good of a research project as possible. Follow the sequence. I've said that. I've hit that several times. I won't go over it again, but you won't go wrong if you follow the sequence. And trust your dissertation chair. We are here to get you through the process, and we are your best advocate, and we're going to do everything we can to get you through the process while maintaining the standards of the PhD. So trust us and stay focused during the process, and try to push through even the times when you want to strangle us, because there will be those times during the process. So just bear with us and try to get through it. And the biggest thing I can tell you is get finished. If you've made it to the dissertation process, you have been through a lot. You have taken all the core courses, and you should be seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. So push through it and get done. Because you have done the hard work. So now it's just demonstrating that you know you can do what you've learned. So with that said, I think we're going to open up to questions now, and Dr. Li, I think, is going to close us out.
Thank you, Dr. Wesley, for the great presentation, and especially Dr. Wesley's tips. The dissertation process is so critical to all doctoral students. Many students are anxious about dissertation study, like topic selection, study design, data collection. I hope this presentation helps a lot for preparing your dissertation studies. Now let's give back the floor to Daniel for Q&A session.
Great, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Wesolek, for the presentation. Thank you, Dr. Li, as well. Got a number of questions in, and the first one, this one is for you, Dr. Wesolek, and give me a second, let me pull this up. And here goes. Since I have been in this degree program, I've learned from my courses, but now I'm questioning my initial idea for my dissertation. When is the last possible time that you would recommend that I change my topic?
Well, first of all, don't be discouraged by that. That is actually a wonderful thing in a way, because you're learning, you're growing, and when you start the program, you're not going to know exactly. you may have an idea of which direction you want to conduct your research in, but no one knows from the beginning what they're going to conduct their research on. And as you learn, you know, it's one of those things when you say in the purest form, ignorance is bliss, right? When you don't know stuff, you don't know that there's an alligator in the swimming pool that's going to eat you. You're happy to go swimming until you've discovered that alligator's there, right? So in this case, that's a very good sign because you're learning, and you're learning that, okay, I may have to change my focus because either I'm changing my interest because of what I've learned, or I'm learning that my research may not be feasible. What I want to do may not be feasible. So either is a great thing, I think, because you're growing as a PhD student. I would, and Dr. Li may have more insight in this, but I'm thinking all the way up until you get to DEL 699, your topic can morph, because 699 is where you really develop your prospectus, and that's where you kind of nail it down. And Dr. Li, you may want to weigh in if I'm off base there. But I will say for the first part, I'm very confident that it's a good sign to be growing as a PhD student and changing your topics, or at least your outlook.
Yeah, I just want to add one more suggestion. I really suggest students to begin to think about your study dissertation topic as early as possible. You know, when you join the program, you begin to take DL courses, so you have an instructor in the course. So if you have any questions related to your idea, you can talk to the instructor and discuss what your interest is, what your idea is. I think you will get advice from the instructor.
Great, thank you both. And the next question, I'm going to send this one to Dr. Wesley first, and also I'm getting a little echo, so if someone out there could mute their phone or computer, please. And Dr. Wesley, the question is, with the research method, often I find myself using mixed method research instead of limiting myself to quantitative or qualitative. Is it possible to maintain a specific method without changing the original design?
In my opinion, mixed methods is the best way. So I'm not exactly about this. So a lot of people start out with doing methods, and then they start thinking, I gain information by interviewing the principal of the schools or whatever that I'm actually looking at GPAs from to get a little bit more insight. So in my opinion, the best type of research is mixed methods, because it allows you to use a little bit of both, and you can gain insight from areas that you may not be able to capture with the other methods. So you can still conduct the same research, but you can add, by doing the mixed methods, if you started out qualitative and you decide to use mixed methods and you add a quantitative component, then you can still use the same research questions, but you can develop new ones to supplement those as well. So you can expand your research, and vice versa. If you started out quantitative, strictly quantitative, and you decided you want to, rather than just looking at GPAs, which would be quantitative, right, of students with the GWiz math program, you could also interview or send surveys to the math teachers as well, and what their thoughts are on it. So you could add that qualitative component, and you can, now here's another concept as well, you can quantify qualitative data. And how do you do that? Through the Likert scale. So Rentis-Likert came up with this scale years ago, and it's become the standard in research. But you can rate your experience at a restaurant. Was it good or bad, better or good, through the scale. And that's a way to quantify, put a number to a qualitative data. However, that's when you get into qualitative data is qualitative data, because my good may be someone else's, my 4 may be somebody else's 5, because it's a little bit subjective. It's not quite as direct. So I got a little off there, but I think mixed methods is the best way. And if you started out with one specific way, either quantitative or qualitative, you can always add the other to make it mixed methods, and that will only supplement your research. And I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. And Dr. Li, do you have anything to add? If not, we can move on. And so, Dr. Wesolek, I'm going to actually direct this next question to both you and Dr. Li. We've got it a few times, but where can students find Trident dissertations from alumni to read and review?
Well, there's 2 really good ways. The first is to ask your dissertation chair to send some of their recent dissertations that they've chaired, because I have students, and because it's published, it's already out there. So I send them, probably my last 3 or 4 dissertations, my most recent dissertations. So you can see formatting, you can see depth and breadth of the research and the writing. That's one way. And then all of them are published. You're required to publish your dissertation in ProQuest. And the university, as a PhD student, you have a subscription to ProQuest. So you can go in there and search for Trident University dissertations.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Li, are there any specific Trident dissertations you would recommend that current students check out? And is reading dissertations something you'd recommend students start doing from the time they start a PhD program?
Yeah, I think, if you go to Trident library and you can search some keywords, especially if you're interested in some area, so you can try the keywords and also, come up Trident dissertation, and you will see a list of the, studies will come up. So either you go to Trident library, or, specify the title of the dissertation, or some, the author, you can either try author's name or title or keywords. Either way, you can find some dissertations, especially, which area you're interested. So you try the keywords. I think that you will find some dissertations.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Li. Dr. Wesley, next question for you. Can you discuss what one can expect and prepare for in the final defense? And that's step 18 you're referring to on your list a few slides back.
Yes, and that's probably the #1 question that everyone has. I had the same thing. It's not as bad as you think, first of all. So I'll let you, it's probably a whole lot less formal than you're going to expect. It's going to be very similar to what we're doing. And basically, what the students do is we'll prepare a PowerPoint to basically brief their dissertation or their proposal to the committee. And during the briefing, the committee members may chime in and say, why did you choose that? I'm getting feedback. I'm going to mute. Okay, hopefully that will fix it. Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear.
Okay. So basically, you'll brief the dissertation. from a PowerPoint through this online forum, just like we're doing here. And the committee members will ask questions. And at the end of well, they may or may not ask questions during the briefing, but at the end, each committee member will ask questions that they've developed throughout the presentation. And you know, you really should look at this as kind of a brainstorming / peer review session, because I don't want to go out too far on a limb, but each of these committee members that you're defending to have already reviewed your dissertation and have given you feedback to make it better and what they think it needs to be. And then they've already given their thumbs up that it's ready for defense. So remember that when you're briefing this. So then all they're doing is they're looking at it to see if you really know this research well, and then it's also kind of a brainstorming session between the group and the peer review to say, you know, oh, well, you know, now that we're discussing this, it's made me think maybe you could do this instead of this to make things a little bit better. That's usually what ends up happening. Rarely have I seen in my 10+ years someone just flat out get a, you did not pass the proposal, or you did not pass the dissertation. So I'll take that stress away from you. It does happen occasionally, but for the most part, there may be major revisions required, there may be minor revisions required. And that's usually because of the brainstorming session that's taken place during the defense. It's a discussion, and better ideas or different ideas come out, and the whole committee with the student can discuss ways to approach that. So it's a whole lot, like I say, it's a whole lot less formal than most people think. It's a, you know, it's a briefing, if you will, and then you get feedback.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Wesolek. And next question for you. This is one that we received prior to the webinar, so you have seen this one already. But the question is, how do I get relevant materials both for my literature reviews and to substantiate my research, especially the historical development of the theory and initiating direction for future research?
Okay, that's a good question. And once again, the Trident Library is your best friend, because everything in there is peer reviewed. So if you've already determined the topic that you're going to conduct your research in, you use the keyword search there, and it will list peer-reviewed journals, dissertations, and then you can filter from there whether you want just dissertations or you want just peer-reviewed journal articles. But you know, the days of, you know, when I did my just to kind of weigh things, when I did my bachelor's degree, I spent a lot of hours in the library looking through microfiche and looking up journals in the library. And I had you have to work hard to get enough supporting documents. Today, with the internet and the online libraries and all that, your challenge is actually not to get enough information, but it's that you get so much information, you've got to figure out what to weed out. And so you probably won't have any problem finding enough information just using the Trident Library, because the Trident Library, when you do that keyword search, it's going out to ProQuest and all of the different journal publications that the university has subscriptions to. So you have a vast amount of peer-reviewed academic level literature that you can just search using keywords.
Great. Thank you. And just a couple more questions left, rounding third base here. And Dr. Li, this question is for you. Can you talk about the process of the qualifying exam a bit?
Sure. I'm sorry, Dr. Li, are you going to take this one?
Okay, I can. The students taking courses, like in the PhD education program, we have, courses DL 622, that is for the qualifying exam. But before that, 610, you have opportunity to prepare the qualifying exam. So the instructor will provide the, instruction how to prepare your written exam, how to prepare the oral exam. So when you're, enroll in 622, then you submit your written exam. When the instructor thinks your written exam in good shape, and the instructor will schedule the oral exam. So generally 2 faculty will attend the oral exam. So if you can pass the oral, then you can move on to the last course, 699. But every student has a twice opportunity. If you failed once, you have a second opportunity to take the oral exam.
Thank you. And Dr. Wesley, do you have anything to add?
No, not really. The qualifying exam, like I said earlier, is a lot like a kind of a mini proposal or dissertation defense. So you'll be asked to prepare questions or prepare answers to questions, and then kind of give a summary of your prospectus or your research topic. And so it kind of gets you warmed up for the dissertation process.
Okay, and Dr. Wesley, second to last question we got here, and it is publishing the ProQuest the only requirement for publishing prior to graduation, or are we also required to publish to a peer-reviewed journal?
No, only publishing to ProQuest that's the only requirement for graduation. However, you're highly encouraged. Now, you have to remember when you start looking through your peer-reviewed journals, they are much less detailed than a dissertation. So you're highly encouraged to reformat your dissertation research into a journal article, but it will be significantly smaller. And for example, the literature review and the methodology section may not be quite as detailed and dynamic for a journal article. But that, if you really want to publish a journal article, I would highly recommend that you get with your committee chair and you co-publish together. That way the committee chair has already published peer-reviewed journal articles, and they can help guide you in the editing of your dissertation to meet the journal article, because they have limitations on the number of pages and the depth and breadth that you submit.
Great, great, thank you. And this is the last, I believe this is the last question we got. There were a lot of questions and comments come in, and as a reminder, if we did miss anything from anyone, it's not that we're ignoring you, it's just that they simply got lost in the mix, and we will follow up with you afterwards. But last question for you, Dr. Wesley, what kind of things should we review to be prepared for the qualifying exam and oral board?
Actually, Dr. Li may be more suited for this question than me, but it's you, and Dr. Li, you can chime in anytime if you want to supplement this, but the qualifying exam, you're going to be given your questions and you'll be able to prepare a written response to them. So it's not like you're on the spot you're given the list of what you can be asked or what's going to be covered. So there'll be no surprises. That's one thing. And basically just answer the questions and have a good understanding of each of the topics that can be discussed.
Yeah, I can add one more point. you know, the qualified exam actually also related to your own dissertation study. So like when you're trying to explain some concepts, it's better to use your own study as an example. So, you know, you have to prepare some idea about your study design, like a sampling approach, like what kind of the measurement tools you use, you know, as such, the questions. So like if you can use your study design as an example to explain the concepts, the committee will, you know, see you understand the concepts well, you're able to conduct your study independently. So it's better to prepare your study topic well when you're taking the qualified exam. So that will help.
Great, thank you. And I know I said it was the last question, but we had one more question slide in, and I wanted to get this one because I think this is important, especially for the first-year students. And Dr. Wesley, this question is, I read in some PhD forums that students often prepare for their dissertations starting in their first year. How would you recommend doing this?
Well, like we talked about, you're going to grow as a PhD student, but usually most people come into a program at least having an idea of where they want to conduct their research because they have interest. I mean, they're not in the PhD educational leadership or the PhD health sciences program by accident. They're there because they have some interest in that field at some level. So I think they kind of already have an idea of where they want to conduct their research. And as you take the different classes, it will help broaden your perspective. And so I don't think it's necessarily a requirement to come in knowing exactly what you want to conduct your research in, but I think that it kind of just falls into place as you're going through the program. You'll start developing ideas from the readings that you do, from the different topics that you look at, and from looking at other dissertations. And you might look at their recommendations for future research, things like that. So I don't think you have to have a topic right away, but I think everybody comes in at least with an interest in a certain area, and they grow as a PhD student through the coursework they take. And that's, once again, by design. This is a tried and true program.
Great, thank you. And that appears to wrap up all our questions for the evening and the session. So just, you know, don't know if do we have any closing comments from our host or presenter tonight?
I think this presentation is really good. You know, a lot of students probably didn't have a chance to join orientation, so they may not very familiar with the process. The process is really helpful for students to prepare your dissertation. So I also suggest, you know, you can also review dissertation handbook. There are a lot of detailed instruction in the handbook. You know, and also if you have any questions, you know, don't hesitate to ask, you know, instructors or me or any faculty, you know, we are here to help you to go through the program.
I agree, and and work through it, and it is so rewarding. Once you have those letters after your name, you can go out and change the world. But it'll be it's kind of like the tough times you go through are worth it in the end, and you kind of forget about it after you finish. So.
Great. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for everyone for participating today. Learn more about, you know, the core and see some of the past webinars and doctoral resources on the core page. Special thanks to Dr. Li for hosting this, and she will be our host next month on the same date, March 28th, for the webinar. your study method first, the first step in successful research. And here's her information if you'd like to reach out to her. And of course, here's our presenter, Dr. Wesolek's information. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.